its major deities, the icon is found on both Luwian and early Aramean imagery. For example, on a Luwian stele depicting the storm god from Tel Barsip, south of Carchemish, as well as on the Aramean style relief from Tel Khalaf. The same ambiguity is also found with regard to a fragment of another cultic stand excavated at Ir David, Jerusalem, which demonstrates that Syrian inspiration did not skip Jerusalem at the end of the 10th, beginning of the 9th century. Although most of the objects bearing Syrian inspiration originate from the northern part of the country. This state of affairs not only mirrors the geographical proximity of northern Israel to Syrian territories, it also reflects, it seems, the more developed urban centers of the north. The depiction on this fragment, as suggested by Pirchia Beck, portrays the killing of Humbaba by Gilgamesh and Enkidu. To date, the only known monumental representations of the killing of Humbaba are from the Luwian or Aramean sources, since it appears at Aramean Tel Khalaf and Luwian Carchemish. Indeed, the killing of Humbaba can be regarded in this period as an international subject matter visually diffused in many areas of the ancient Near East. Its finding in Jerusalem, thus, hints to the integration of Judah within the contemporary surrounding concepts of its neighbors. I move back now to the north and wish to discuss another type of artifact, a bronze medallion discovered at Tel Dan. The object was made locally as implied by the negligent workmanship. However, the theme engraved here betrays Luwian imagery, in particular the wind goddess mounted on a bull. Where wind goddesses are found on Syrian monuments echoing Hittite imagery, such as the Iron Age reliefs of En-Dara and Malatia Melid. Hittite inscriptions identify the wind goddess with a specific divine image bearing the Hurrian epithet Shaushga, meaning the Great Lady, an epithet used in relation to Ishtar during the late Hittite period in Iron Age Syria, Anatolia. The typical pictorial traits of Shaushga are her wings, an element which is not found in the depictions of Mesopotamian Ishtar. The image of the wind goddess depicted on the bronze medallion from Dan then is inspired by Luwian imagery. Even the unusual display on the Dan plaque showing the goddess standing on a bull instead of the more common display of a goddess mounted on a lion finds parallel in Luwian context, again in Malatia, on a relief accompanied by a hieroglyphic Luwian inscription. Syrian inspiration can also be traced on another very fragmentary medallion from Tel Dan depicting a banquet scene topped by a winged disk. In its composition, this second medallion from Dan parallels various steles depicting a standing person in front of a seated one with a chair loaded with food between the two figures. But as with the case of the winged disc and the killing of Humbaba, it is not possible to determine to which of the first millennium Syrian tradition we should assign this medallion from Dan. I wish to end this talk with a well-known stele found at the gate of Bethsaida on the northern eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. The stele differs from the other artifacts in the fact that it represents an official monumental work of art and not small artifacts used by private people, some possibly members of elite segments. Although the imagery of the stela relates to the worship of an Aramean moon god best represented at Haran, its unique visual traits, in particular the combination of the crescent with the bull head, diverge from the emblem of the crescent on pole typical to Haran, and implies that the monument was probably associated with an Aramean entity whose patron god could have been symbolized by both the moon and the bull. As hinted by the depiction on the stele, the deity as storm god was also typified by warlike characteristics expressed by the addition of the sword. A possible candidate suitable for this type of storm god could be Hadad Ramon, whose temple at Damascus is mentioned in Kings 2:5-18. Considering the attribution of this stele to the latter part of the 9th century or early 8th century, and the find spot of two other similar monuments in the Quran, a fourth example is kept nowadays in Gaziantep at Turkey, we may propose that these type of steles were part of the political visual propaganda by which Aram Damascus, the southernmost Aramean kingdom, was manifested. The erection of these steles in this period, I'm sorry, well, you have to remember it, it's somehow, I'll just keep on and you will remember. The erection of these steles in this period no doubt imitated the Assyrian practice of constructing standing stones and rock reliefs throughout the empire for marking and displaying the territorial expansion of Assyria. Similarly, the bedside stele demonstrated the expansion and rule of Aram Damascus in the Lower Galilee during the reigns of either Hazael or Bar-Hadad, kings of Aram. Thank you. Toda.
We have some time for questions or comments. Is there? No.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask? ודאי. עמי. תצטרף לנו.
Thank you for saving me 1 minute from my lecture to show the altars. But, you mentioned the possibility of some northern traditions. Of course, we have a gap of 300 years between the altars in Syria and those that appear in Israel, the late 10th century, early 9th century. But it reminded me when I dealt with those altars, studies like those of Daniel Fleming, and maybe biblical scholars here will comment on this, that look for all kind of North Syrian traditions, especially from the Emor documents in the Bible, even some of the laws in the Torah. And we have all those traditions about at least some of the Israelites related to this region, Haran and so on. So maybe that we have something here that we have to investigate more. But I leave it for biblical scholars and historians to discuss.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you.